Chapter 16. Thar she blows. Yikes, Ricky exclaimed. A ride in a copter. Uncle Russ suggested that Sue, Jean, Holly, and Pam be the first to go up with Sky Larkin. The girls scrambled into the helicopter and the pilot shut the door. The big rotors whirred, lifting them into the air. As they went along the shorefront, Pam and Jean looked hard for a rock resembling a frog, but could not see one. 15 minutes later, they were back. When they landed, the four girls jumped down to the sand. "Oh, it was simply wonderful," Pam cried in delight. "You boys will just love it." Pete, Ricky, Teddy, and Uncle Russ stepped into the helicopter. When it rose into the air, Sky Larkin asked, "Would you like to take a spin out over the ocean?" "Oh, yes," the boys answered together. From that height, the waves looked very green, and the whitecaps had lacy edges. Suddenly Pete pointed out across the water. "Is that a submarine out there?" Something dark lay on the surface of the sea. Then, all at once, a long plume of white mist spouted up from the object. "It's a whale!" Pete shouted. "You're right," Sky agreed. "Would you like to get a closer look at him?" "Oh, yes." Sky guided the helicopter straight toward the whale, at the same time dropping closer to the water. "I hope this noise doesn't scare him away," Teddy said, as they approached the long black whale. But the big mammal did not move. Soon they were directly over him. Sky said, "Pete, come up here if you want a better look." The boy came forward and leaned out the pilot's window. As he peered down at the gigantic creature, the pilot called out, "Thar she blows!" Another plume of spray suddenly spouted up from the head of the whale directly at the helicopter. Before Pete could duck back in, the strong stream of salt water hit him full force. "Ugh!" Pete cried, pulling his head back into the helicopter. Though he was a sorry sight, the boy was not harmed, and the others had to laugh. They offered handkerchiefs and scarves for him to wipe his head and arms, but Pete declared that all he wanted right now was a good bath and fresh water. "That wasn't so bad as being in the whale's tummy like Jonah," Teddy teased him. "You ought to be proud," Ricky grinned. "I'll bet you're the only boy a whale ever spouted at." "Well, I'll trade places with you," Pete said. But the whale had dived and gone off. Sky took the helicopter back to the beach. His passengers climbed out, and he took off. As the Hollisters went back to the house, Uncle Russ said to the children, "Tomorrow's the big day, isn't it? I expect you to locate the pirate's treasure." "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful?" Pam cried. Scowbanger kept his appointment. Next morning, he drove Ginny Jump up in front of the Hollister house, and all the children, as well as Zip, hopped in. The old man drove them several miles down the beach, then stopped his buggy. "All out here," he said. "The old Frog Rock is somewhere in this vicinity." It was ebb tide, and the shore seemed to stretch far out into the ocean. Scowbanger pointed to several large black rocks strewn along the beach near the water's edge. "I think one of these might be the Frog Rock you're looking for," he said. All the children, who were in bathing suits, splashed through the shallow water out to the round, slippery rocks. They examined them, one after another, but none looked anything like a frog's head. "Well," Scowbanger said, squinting his eyes and peering along the shore, "maybe my old memory's failing me. I thought sure this was the place where the Frog Rock looked across to Spain." The children in their search had been too busy to pay attention to Zip. He had been teasing a baby crab. But now the dog bounded off down the beach. Suddenly the collie began to bark. When the children turned to look up at him, Zip was far down the shore. His front paws were resting on a large rock, and he was staring at a seagull perched on top of it. "Let's go down there," Ricky said eagerly. "Maybe that's the Frog Rock." They ran along the sand, finally coming to the place where their pet was. The seagull had flown away, and the dog was sniffing in the sand. Hopefully, The children walked around the rock to see what it looked like. "I don't think this is it, do you?" Pam asked. Pete viewed the rock from another angle. Then suddenly he said excitedly, "Come here!" The others ran to his side, where they caught a good profile view of the rock. "It looks just like a frog's head," Ricky shouted. "We found it! We found it!" Holly screamed jubilantly. By this time, Scowbanger had caught up to the children in his beach buggy. Pete showed him the likeness of a frog's head, and he grinned happily. "Congratulations to you. The Hollisters have found the place where the mystery went down." "Zip found it," Sue spoke up staunchly. "Now what'll we do?" Jean asked. "The ship's probably underwater." They held a little parley. Teddy thought maybe they should notify the town authorities, but the others talked him out of this. "Let's try to find it ourselves," Pete urged. "Let's dig right now," Ricky cried excitedly as he looked around for something to dig with. Scowbanger said they would need strong tools to dig in the sand, and they would have to hurry, too, if they expected to do much before the tide came in. And besides, a storm was brewing. The beachcomber had an idea. "How about Ricky and me standing guard here with the girls, while you, Pete, and Teddy take the beach buggy and fetch some shovels from your house?" "Swell," said Pete enthusiastically. He grinned. "Is Ginny Jump fixed so she'll stop when I want her to?" "Yes, indeed. I fixed her so she won't play any more tricks." The boys hopped in, and Pete drove away quickly. As they reached the area where the bathers were, he had to slow down and skirt them carefully. "With this traffic jam, the tide'll start coming in before we get back," Pete grumbled. But finally they reached their house and stopped. The boys rushed in to tell their families the exciting news, and the grown-ups were astounded. "You've really found the site of the missing pirate ship mystery," Uncle Russ exclaimed. "Wonderful!" "We'll all go back with you," Aunt Marge said. The shovels and spades and even a rusty pick were collected. Pete ran outside ahead of the others to start the car. At the wheel sat Homer roughly. "Hey, get out of there," Pete shouted. "I will not," Homer said. "I guess I can run this as much as you." But Homer saw fire in Pete's eye. He did not want to be beaten in another fight. A sly scheme came to him. Quickly pulling the key out of the ignition, he put it into his pocket. Then he jumped and started to run. "Try and get the old buggy started," he shouted gleefully. Pete instantly knew what Homer had done and gave chase. The trickster had a good head start, and though Pete ran as fast as he could, he was not able to catch Homer. But he won't get away with this, Pete determined. On and on they went. Homer was headed for the river. Reaching it, he jumped into a motorboat, untied it, and pushed the starter button. The motor did not catch at once. Homer fumed. Pete was getting closer. Then suddenly the engine roared into life. Just as Homer steered from the dock, Pete reached it. With a flying leap, he landed in the motorboat. "Give me that key, Homer," he shouted. Homer paid no attention. By this time, the boat was racing along at a good clip. As Pete moved up front to Homer, it sped out of the channel into the ocean. "Give me that key and turn around," Pete demanded. "Nothing doing," Homer replied. "I'll throw the key overboard before I give it to you." Pete tried to grab the steering wheel, but the other boy gave him a shove. By this time, they were out beyond the breakers. Still, Homer did not turn. "Where are you going?" Pete said, trying to yank the wheel about. Suddenly, a look of fright came over Homer's face. "This wheel, it's stuck! I can't turn back!" he cried in alarm.